Okay. So Mamie Ba, that's Mamie, last name Ba, Bah. I'm a news reporter for KDKA TV News in Pittsburgh.
I'm so happy that you're able to do this, Mamie. It's really important, especially with you being an African-American woman in one of the major markets in the country, that we're able to hear from you, because when we hear from you, we're actually hearing from her community. We're actually hearing from her community. And so it's really important, and especially because I know you're originally from New York, and us New Yorkers sometimes take things for granted, right? We take some of the freedoms that we have. We take being a diverse city for granted sometimes. But then I know that you've also worked in the Ohio market, and now you're in Pittsburgh. And so I think I want to start with, what's that market like as a woman, working the streets, the grounds as a reporter every day in that market?
I would definitely have to say you have a lot more different perspectives. I feel like in New York, you're really used to the hustle and bustle of it all, everyone moving so quickly. New York is so diverse. When you leave New York, it's not really the same, right? Diversity isn't really the same. In New York, you can see someone and they can be from anywhere in the world. In Pittsburgh, it's really different. I would say it's the same thing when I lived in Ohio for a few years as a reporter there too. And so that really does impact the reporting. It impacts the perspectives that you get. And of course, as you know, it definitely impacts the politics of it all.
I know when you first got to Pittsburgh, you worked on a very important piece about African Americans and the history of Pittsburgh. Before we get into the politics of it all in your market, tell us a little bit about what that piece was about, and it brings us to today.
Yeah, so we do know that, back in the day when people were trying to escape slavery, right? Pittsburgh has the water, and a lot of people were using the water to get where they needed to get. It was the gateway to the West. And so Pittsburgh played a really crucial role, and so did a lot of different buildings and structures and so many different for example, businesses like a barber shop where like at night people would then go, right? These were really important stops on the Underground Railroad where people would go and they would get disguises and they would continue their journey to freedom. And some of those structures are still standing in the city. Some of them have been torn down. For example, the Monongahela House Hotel, this was along the riverfront. This was a very important stop on the Underground Railroad for some people. You had people who would come and visit, they would bring their slaves with them, and the people who worked at the Monongahela House Hotel would then help those people escape and get them out of the hotel when their masters were out to dinner. And so, this really was a pivotal city. And so after a few years, the Monongahela House Hotel was torn down and, a highway was built through that area. So, some of the history is gone, but some of it is still here. And so I did a lot of research on that. So it took a lot of digging, but definitely, a lot of places in Pittsburgh really played a crucial role in people's route to freedom.
And see, and that's why I wanted you to tell that story, Mamie. I knew the story, but I want all of our viewers to understand why Pittsburgh is important on the African-American trail when we're talking about democracy. You just talked about a story that you worked on that took us way back. And then I don't even know if you realized it, but you said the masters, right? Because that's the time when people referred to the owners, we were slaves, as masters. So now we fast forward to 2024 in this election race, which is so contentious, but it's also historic, right? And so when we talk about the Pittsburgh market, and I believe, and I want you to tell us this, I think it's more blue than it is, of course, red, but I think it's also a market that can be on the fence. Can African Americans and people of color in Pittsburgh afford to be on the fence with this type of election that's coming up?
I would definitely have to say it's a toss-up like we've seen all these years. And especially, it's really reflective what's happening here in Pittsburgh of the state of Pennsylvania, it being a purple state, a swing state, really one of those states where both candidates know they really have to go out and campaign and do what it takes to really win the vote here, which is really important, especially when you think about the Electoral College vote. So it's really a toss-up. You just really never know. We do know that you do have older Americans who are like, no matter what, they are going to to vote for Joe Biden. They feel like that is what needs to be done, right? These are the cards that we have been dealt. But then you have younger voters who are saying, no, I want a whole new set of cards. This is not okay. This is what you told me in 2020. In 2020, you told me I was voting for the lesser of two evils. Why are we here again, right? Why didn't the Democratic Party just choose another candidate? A lot of younger voters were okay with Biden just being sort of this transitional phase, right? Leaving the Trump administration, right? And then now you had Biden come in. They were okay with him doing just one term. And now it's like, okay, wait, he's running again. And can he do it? And so older Americans are like, okay, we're going to vote for him no matter what. And younger Americans are just like, we don't want to vote for him. We shouldn't have to vote for him again.
So in other words, don't force us to make a decision we don't want. But what it sounds like I'm hearing you say is that the older generation, more of the ones that were more akin or more in line to the former history of Pittsburgh, is saying, we don't want anything shaky. We just want democracy, because we understand what our ancestors, you know, and not too far removed, our relatives went through to try and get freedom. We have freedom now and we want to keep it. The younger generation is probably a little bit more, and dare I say, spoiled, where, you know, they're a little bit more like, well, I want choice and I want to choose. And they don't really understand the stakes in terms of what losing democracy feels like, what it looks like. And it doesn't mean that we're going back to slavery. But when we look at some of the rules that are being instituted, or some of the words that are coming out of some of the candidates' mouths, of course, former President Donald Trump, it makes you think that it's a possibility that people of color could possibly go back to those historic days that you referenced.
Exactly, because for a lot of people, you know, especially, you know, older voters, it's not about voting for Joe Biden. It's about a vote for democracy. And that's what a lot of people are talking about. They are talking about, you know, the things that we take for granted, the freedoms. And they're saying, you know, this is the right thing to do. Necessarily, when you go out to vote in November, you're not voting for Biden, you're voting for democracy. And then younger voters who are saying, no, I don't want to do this. But, you know, when it really comes down to it, it just comes down to, you know, what do people think is best for them, right? What do they see for the future? We do know that when it comes to marginalized groups, right, they think to themselves about, you know, some of the freedoms that they're going to lose. Members of the LGBTQ plus community, right? They think about those things. And we also know that, you know, even with Trump, right, you know, during that debate, and it's something that's been trending online, hashtag Black jobs. And we do know that the Black community has the power to take something that they believe is negative and turn it into a positive, right? But it's something everyone is still talking about. And it's just like, you know, this somewhat showcases what we can expect if, you know, this man was to get another opportunity to be back in office.
So you hit on something that we are about to dig into. Mommy, maybe just stay with us for a moment. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're actually going to dig into what Black jobs are. And I want to hear from you what you learned when you went out to the streets of Pittsburgh from some of the young voters. Can you stay with us?
Yes.
All right. We'll be right back more with Mamie Bob. I got to jump on my serious interview, so pause that.
Okay.
It starts at 7. Back here now with Mamie Bob, a reporter out of, okay, sorry, I heard
I'll start again.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. We're rejoined with Mamie Ba out of Pittsburgh, one of the correspondents for the CBS affiliate there. Mamie is originally from New York. She's worked around the country. She's coming from the Dayton, Ohio market. She is a woman of color and she knows what is going on in her market. Before we went to break, Mamie, we were talking about some of the history, the historical basis of democracy from the standpoint of the people that are based in Pittsburgh, what their history is like with their family, what happened with that story that you covered when you first got there. I want to bring it to the election now, as we get ready, and we're here at the Republican National Convention. 3, 2, 1. I want to bring it back to now, as we prepare for the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention. I think it's very important that people understand what's at stake. A lot of people talk about it. As journalists, we talk about it. We get on television and on radio and on social. But what's really happening in the streets? And I know that you've been out in your community trying to find some answers from especially young Black voters.
Yeah, and I think a lot of young Black voters are very much so worried about the president's mental state. Can he survive a second term? And, you know, a lot of older voters are saying, stop looking at that and look at what he has done, right? We can't really afford to have Trump back in office. This is the man that tried to overturn the election results despite the overwhelming facts that the results were completely correct. He was trying to overturn those results. And a lot of people are pointing to that. They're pointing to the fact that pointing also to the fact that he's a convicted felon, that he feels like he can bend the rules whenever he feels like it. And they're not only associating that with Trump, they're also associating that with the Republican Party altogether and saying that the party itself feels like whenever something isn't okay, then they can just bend the rules. And Trump is proof of that. They talk about January 6th, what happened that day when the president that time, Trump, did not come out and stop what was going on. Instead, he was in the White House. And so these are certain things that older voters are pointing to and saying, do we want this to happen again, right? And even during that debate, you had them ask Trump, you know, when the results come around in November, are you going to go against the results the same way you did in 2020? And he couldn't really directly give an exact answer. And he just said, well, if they're correct, right? And so a lot of people are just saying, you know, we don't want a repeat of what happened the last time. Joe Biden is the safe option, not only because it's a vote, it's not even about voting for Joe Biden, as I mentioned before, that people are saying, they're saying it's a vote for democracy. It's to preserve what is left of the system.
What is left of the system? This is the United States of America. We have the best democratic system in the world. And so for you to say that it's now to like what's left, that can be scary. Talk to me about, do you have a clip of anyone that you spoke to that you can run in?
Yes, let me grab that. So let's play this. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it.
If you share the screen, does it work if you share the screen with it?
Let me see.
I can also, I don't know.
No, I don't think so. Show caption, pause, share screen. Oh, okay, right here.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is. Share.
Okay, and that's good.
Ready? Oh. Start again.
So where are you at following the debate? I do not plan on voting for President Biden. I believe that we need a new candidate. I think it's disappointing that we had all this time leading up to the election to realize that. And since voters didn't get too many moments to see the president off cuff and really assess the situation themselves, we had to put our trust in the Democratic Party. And unfortunately, they made the wrong call.
There's a lot at stake this November, and it's very, for me and other young people, it's very nerve-wracking. This one in particular, because of how high the stakes are, it just is a whole different level of anxiety-inducing. So that's what all of the young people I know and I work with and talk with are feeling. They're feeling incredibly nervous about what's coming in November.
This will be, the first election where I should not, in good faith, vote for the Democratic Party if they put forward Joe Biden. I would never go for Donald Trump. But I would vote third party. What do you say to people who say this is not a vote for Biden, it's a vote for democracy? Well, then I think if they truly believe that, they should urge their elected leaders to fight to replace the candidate. So if you truly believe that this is a vote to save democracy, then you need to give democracy its best shot with the best candidate possible.
I share their thoughts that a better candidate should have been put forward for this. But at the end of the day, for me, I will vote for whoever the Democratic candidate or nominee is. I don't see it necessarily as voting for Joe Biden. I see it as voting to protect democracy, to protect LGBTQ rights, to see some type of peaceful solution to the war in Gaza, to seeing the further expansion of healthcare benefits.
He did all that in 2016 in Pennsylvania.
And then we can pick back up on that too. And because I want to talk to you and then roll that. So 3, 2, 1. So Mamie, what I heard in that piece was fear. And those are young people in Pittsburgh, which is one of our, blue collar unionized towns. What did you feel talking to those voters? What did you feel?
I thought that I did definitely felt the fear and also the frustration of why are we here again, right? Why are we sort of looking at a rematch of 2020. We do know that, the president is now on this tour to reassure voters following that debate almost 2 weeks ago, and trying to instill confidence in them that he is okay and that he can run and he can do a second term here. But people are just not convinced despite what is going on. We do know that he sat down with George Stephanopoulos, and even that did not help the situation, because people think to themselves, these are controlled environments. The debate is a different kind of environment. And for the first time, we saw Donald Trump on what many people arguably will say was his best behavior, because it worked in his favor to just let Biden talk and not complete a thought. And so people are worried, but also it's just like, you have no other choice here for what some people are looking at. You just have no other choice. You just have to vote for Biden. That's what some people think. And then others think, what incentive do I have to go out to the polls and vote? And so,
as you've been out in the streets and talking to, just as you do your stories, have you found many people that are maybe leaning toward, have you found the Trumpers? Have you found people that say, hey, I don't really care that he's a convicted felon, or that he lies and doesn't tell the truth, and that he's a sexual abuser, and the long litany of things he's stolen from his company. Everyone in his camp has almost been arrested and serving time. Steve Bannon just went to jail on July 1st. Rudy Giuliani is going to jail. I mean, all of his campaign, besides his immediate family, and they also are probably going to be looked into soon, are the people that you hear from that like Trump, what do they say?
They honestly, when you look at all of the things that you just talked about, these are things arguably that have definitely enhanced his support. And people almost look at that like, wow, he survived, right? Some people really just love the comeback kid. They love that story. They love that narrative. So you do have a very small population, right, of young Black American voters who they like that. They like the fact that he has been able to overcome. They don't care about all those things, right? Come November, they are going to head into their polling stations and they are going to cast a vote for Trump, right? Regardless of what is happening. But those people also are not going to come to the forefront to say, hey, this is what I believe in. They're not doing that. They are of the minority, and they are too afraid, some of them, to speak out and say how they truly feel. But there is a minority of young Black voters and even older voters who are going to vote for Trump come November, regardless of everything that he has going on. To them, he survived it, and people are just trying to bring him down.
That is a very good point that you just brought up. And I think it's been why, what happens when you do it on the side? Sorry. 3, 2, 1. That was a very good point that you just brought up. And I think Trump has been riding that wave of Black people understand me, because now I'm a convicted felon, which many people, it's just rude. It's rude to say, it's disrespectful to say. But to your point of people that say it's a comeback story, it's the story of the people that helped build this country, often overlooked, had to work super hard. Now, Trump has never been overlooked. Trump has never had to work super hard because he came from money and then, continued to spread the wealth, build the wealth, and keep it within his family. But for a minority or a Black person to say that they like the comeback story, they're taking that personally. Is that what you say? Is that what you feel? They're taking it personally instead of looking at the facts.
Yeah, and really looking at the policies, right? See, it's one thing if you are, supporting a candidate because of their policies versus supporting a candidate because you feel like they have been able to come back from all these things that arguably they have been accused of and convicted of. It's a whole different ballgame here, right? And so even when you think about some of the things, like we talked about before we went to break, right? That comment about Black jobs, right? And what people are really saying is, what you're really trying to say is the low paid, the low security, the physically demanding jobs. That is what you mean. And it's racist, And when you think about that and you think about the whole, well, I can relate to you guys now because I'm a convicted felon, right? these just subtle racism, right? That some people are not seeing as that, right? They're seeing as, oh yeah, you're right, you can relate to us and you're the comeback kid because we understand what it's like, versus other people who are saying to themselves like, this is racist.
Yeah, because that's also saying that all Black people are felons. Right? That's like saying the majority of Black people are felons or have committed a crime. Right? And so that's the, and I think when you made a good point to say they're not looking at policy. They're looking at the familiarity of a personal connection there. My question is, and here, you know, in New York and in DC and as I travel across the country and talk to people, what I've noticed is that some people just say that they think that he can manage the country better, and that the last time, you know, it was COVID and he didn't really get a chance to manage. I don't know if you've come across any of those in your reporting in Pittsburgh, but my thought is he did not manage the company well. When you look at the two candidates, you look at what Joe Biden has done and his long list of accomplishments, besides the fact that he's been in Congress longer than you and I have even been alive. He's got a long list of accomplishments. When you talk about policies, aren't we supposed to be choosing the best person to run the country and to lead the free world? Because that's what the president of the United States does.
You know, and I think this really begs the next question of like, are we more focused on the entertainment aspect of it than exactly what is coming out of either candidate's mouths at this point, right? When you think about that part in the debate where they were talking about golfing, it seems like they were more interested in that than anything else. And people couldn't stop talking about that, right? And so I think some of it too, with their younger voters, and this is something that older voters have pointed out, right? You guys are more concerned with an image, right? The image of appearing to be put together, the entertainment of it all, right? Trump saying things that other politicians normally wouldn't say versus Biden, who is actually getting stuff done. So are we more so, which is what older voters are saying, are we more so worried about an image than what is actually being done? And so I think that's really what it comes down to when you really, really think about it, and where we're at, even as, you know, as a country, where we're at in regard to entertainment, in regard to politics, everything's kind of bleeding into each other. And so people just don't want to just listen to the policies because that's boring. You want to listen to the policies with all the extras in it. And sometimes that doesn't really do too much.
We have Mamie Ba here. She is a reporter for CBS out of Pittsburgh. She's working that market. And we asked her to find out what was going on. What are the real people thinking? People on the ground after, you know, watching the debate, which Mamie discussed. And then we looked to see how people voted before in Pittsburgh, especially with the historical ties to slavery. Pittsburgh is a union town. It's a blue collar, everyday American, hard grinding, get up, lunch pail type of town. And so it's really interesting to hear the dichotomy of people of color, of some that you said may not come out and actually admit it aloud, but there are a few people that would vote for Donald Trump. And by the way, vote for whomever you think is right for you. But to your point, we also, it's also interesting to hear people vote not on the policies, but on the entertainment or from a personal standpoint. Was there anything else that stood out to you as you talked to people in your pieces?
One more thing I wanted to point out is that I know I was out at a bar one night and I was talking to someone, and young Black man in his 30s, and he could agree with some of the things that Trump has put forth, but he said to me, because of my community, I cannot go to the polls and cast a vote for him because I'm thinking overall, yes. And so there are people like that as well, right? They can understand what he's talking about, they can agree, but they just feel like they cannot knowingly go out and vote for him because of the message it sends to their community overall. So there are voters like
he was actually speaking from a conscious standpoint. His conscience would not let him go cast a vote for Donald Trump.
Yes. So I definitely wanted to point that out. And I do know that, you know, Pennsylvania is a swing state, right? Anything can happen in this state, but we do know that certain cities in the state will, no matter what, be blue, or no matter what, be red. So that is just something to put out there as well.
And we're going to hear more from your pieces there with the people that you talked to and try and break that down. But I think it's important that we play that whole piece so that our viewers can kind of understand what the discussion that you and I are having, why it's important. And then we'll also try and put up a link to that piece that you did when you first got to the Pittsburgh market, the historical slavery piece, which I just think is brilliant. And for those people that sit at home and don't even know that there was a slave trade happening in Pittsburgh, it's real. And by the way, this country has lots of slave trades in towns that you would not believe. So we'll also put up a link to Mamie Ba's piece there too. I want to thank you so much for your time. I almost don't want to let you go. What did we miss?
I think we've covered it all. I think we've covered it all here.
Thank you so much for joining us on Join the Conversation, Politics in Color. And for all of you, thank you for streaming with us. And you'll see more from Mamie Ba as we get closer to the convention. We're going to run some of these pieces. You can find her online. But again, you can go to our website and you'll be able to find the content there. Mamie Ba, 321. Mamie Ba, thank you so much for joining us. And you have a good election trail, a campaign trail.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Listen, I honestly, when it comes down to it, and I think you know this, as journalists, we kind of wait for these moments, right? These are defining moments in history and we are a part of it. And so I am just looking forward to documenting it and bringing viewers the most accurate and up-to-date information. And so I can't wait to see what happens here. And I can't wait to see what happens in November.
Pittsburgh is lucky to have you.
Thank you so much.
Everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.